Good evening. It's April 7th, 2017. My name is Matthew Ogden, and you're watching our Friday evening webcast here from LaRouchePack.com. I'm joined in the studio by Benjamin Deniston and via video by Diane Sayer from Manhattan, New York City, and Keisha Rogers from Houston, Texas, both members of the LaRouchePack Policy Committee. Now, I need to begin today's broadcast by saying 24 hours ago, while I was preparing to put together this broadcast, I had thought that the subject of discussion was going to be the extremely positive developments that were occurring both with the introduction of the Glass-Steagall bill into the United States Senate, which is S-881 by Elizabeth Warren, Maria Cantwell, Senator McCain, and Senator King, which was directly following the voicing again of support for the Glass-Steagall principle by a leading member of the Trump administration, Gary Cohen, the director of the National Economic Council, which occurred at the exact same time as a very high-level summit, which is just concluded in Mar-a-Lago, Florida, between President Trump and President Xi Jinping, which had been prepared by Secretary of State Rex Tillerson during his recent trip to China, and where he voiced his support for the formulation of a win-win cooperation and non-confrontation, non-conflict between the United States and China. However, unfortunately, between that time 24 hours ago and this time, President Trump has made the decision to launch a military strike, a missile strike against a airbase belonging to the Syrian government in response to an alleged chemical weapon attack by the Syrian government on Syrian civilians. So I'm going to begin today's broadcast by reading to you a paraphrase of some remarks that both Lyndon and Helga LaRouche had on this situation, which will follow up by a call for a mobilization to get the truth about what really happened over the last 24 hours. What Helga Zepp-LaRouche said this morning, as the news was just breaking that this attack had occurred, was the following. She said, "This was stupid, the result of confusion in the administration and neocon elements who do not want to see the new power relationships that could come out of a US, Russia, China alliance." Then later, during a subsequent phone call that we had with her and Lyndon LaRouche, Helga LaRouche said the following. "How did this come to be? Apparently, there is a big brawl inside the Trump administration. It's disgusting. There's a story here that we don't have. Someone must have manipulated Trump to do this or lied to President Trump. How did he come to this position? We must make an effort to find out." Now, Helga Zepp-LaRouche made a direct reference to a piece that was published on the blog of a leading military intelligence expert, a man named Pat Lang, who is tied in with some of the leading both active duty and retired military and intelligence networks in the United States. And that blog began by saying the following. Donald Trump's decision to launch cruise missile strikes on a Syrian Air Force base was based on a lie. In the coming days, the American people will learn that the intelligence community knew that Syria did not drop a military chemical weapon on innocent civilians in Idlib. Here's what happened, he said. And he elaborated several points, which include point 3. The Syrian Air Force hit a target which was believed to be a weapons explosive depot for Islamic rebels with conventional weapons. All involved in the strike expected to see a massive secondary explosion. That did not happen. Instead, smoke, chemical smoke, began billowing from the site. It turns out that the Islamic rebels had used that site to store chemicals, not sarin, that were deadly. The chemicals included organic phosphates and chlorine, and they followed the wind and killed civilians. And then he says there was a strong wind blowing that day, and the cloud was driven to a nearby village and caused casualties. And then he says, we know it was not sarin. How? Very simple. The so-called first responders handled the victims without gloves. If it had been sarin, they would have died. Sarin on the skin will kill you. And Helga Zepp-LaRouche quoted directly from this statement by reading the following. This is Gulf of Tonkin 2. How ironic. Donald Trump correctly castigated George W. Bush for launching an unprovoked, unjustified attack on Iraq in 2003. Now we have President Donald Trump doing the same damn thing. Worse, in fact, because the intelligence community had information showing that there was no chemical weapon launched by the Syrian Air Force. Now I'm going to let Diane elaborate a little bit more the mobilization, which we're now calling all viewers of this webcast to engage in. But the question is, who in the intelligence community withheld the truth from President Donald Trump? Who lied to the president and influenced him to make this very bad decision? So Diane, let me hand it over to you.
Good. I'll just say that Mr. LaRouche stressed that this is a fraud, that people on the ground in Syria, from all accounts we could get, were aware of what happened, which was a Syrian army strike on a rebel-held, what they believed to be weapons depot, which turned out to be a chemical weapons facility. That Assad did not do this, that Assad would have no interest in doing it, and this intelligence was kept from the president deliberately. Now, as Matt said at the beginning, you have this occurring precisely at the moment that Xi Jinping is arriving in the United States to meet with President Trump. We know that the British Empire, the cities of London and Wall Street, are clinging desperately with their fingernails to a bankrupt system. And the last thing that they want is for the United States to join into win-win collaboration with China and Russia. We also know that there is a history of British operations to bring the United States into war, starting most, I guess the first one in people's memory today might be Maggie Thatcher's visits to Bush to put so-called iron in his spine to go to war in Iraq. Then we had Tony Blair, who has been investigated in the Chilcot inquiry, having lied about weapons of mass destruction to start a war. And now I'll just read you something, an interview with the British Defense Secretary published in something called the East Lothian Courier. Sir Michael Fallon told Sky News, quote, "We've been in close contact with the American government over the last couple of days following the gas attack. There have been intensive consultations in London, in Washington, and the United Nations. The American Defense Secretary called me to discuss the various options early yesterday evening, and once the president had made his decision, then the American Defense Secretary called me again to give us advance notice of the strike. And the Prime Minister has been kept informed throughout." What is the British? Britain is running American military decisions? And then he was asked, did this action catch you by surprise? And the British Defense Secretary said, no, we've seen the first test of the Trump administration here. So then I think we have there a tweet from a BBC correspondent, Catty K, I guess that's an appropriate name for her, and it says, on a side note, how to undermine a major summit with China. So just in case you weren't clear, that the target of this is actually Donald Trump. The target of this operation is to destroy his ability to make America great again, which is what collaborating with China and Russia would do. And the truth of the matter is, as everyone who's been following this for some time would know that President Assad had absolutely no reason, no motive, not to mention that the chemical weapons were eliminated 3 years ago, which was the arrangement that Putin established, which prevented Barack Obama from doing the same thing at that time. So the president was lied to, the crucial intelligence was prevented from getting to him, and the actions taken can jeopardize the success of his administration and the potential for a global economic renaissance. And we are urging that everybody will repeat this again, I'm sure, but people should call the White House. You should contact Trump on Twitter and make the point that this is, we know that lies were told to the president about the situation on the ground, and the truth has to come out, and the perpetrators of this disinformation should be exposed and fired from the Trump administration.
Well, I'm going to put on the screen right now the contact information that you can do just that. This is the way to contact the White House. Call the number 202-465-1111, I believe. And you can also tweet at President Donald Trump, obviously, either at POTUS or at Real Donald Trump. And we're going to elaborate more of the contents of that mobilization as we proceed this discussion. But we'll put that contact information on the screen for you a few more times during this broadcast. There you go, 202-465-1111.
I think that's critical, because I think what our viewers really need to understand, this isn't a settled thing. You know, there's also been references to power plays, shifts inside the administration. You know, there's obviously conflicting interests coming in from all sides trying to influence it one way or the other. So this is, I think, indicative of an undetermined process. So we're not just, you know, observers watching history before our eyes. We need to be thinking of ourselves as active in this process. And Trump very clearly resonated with the American people in making it very clear we want to end this regime change policy. We don't need these foreign wars. We also want a serious effort against terrorism, right? Real terrorism, the kind of stuff Obama was supporting explicitly, that the British have been running for decades. And this is, you know, clearly a turn in a different direction. So people who want that policy, who supported him on that basis, need to become active and vocal and say, we need this real shift in American foreign policy, as we've discussed. And, you know, I think the other point that just the irony that people really need to get, you're not going to understand the reality of the situation, what the forces are at play in creating this setup, this operation to get this strike to go through, unless you understand the significance of these contrary positive developments that we just referenced, the meeting between the heads of the United States and China. This is huge. You know, all the prior discussion about potentially alleviating tensions with Russia and having a positive cooperation with Russia, which drove people nuts to, you know, revive the spirit of Joe McCarthy and, you know, just completely go crazy with the new Red Scare propaganda campaign, just shows you how desperate certain factions are to keep this U.S. Anglo-American unipolar world alliance alive, requiring the suppression and the keeping down of Russia and China. And the fact that that is being legitimately threatened, we're seeing the potential, a real active motion towards a new global alliance with the United States, China, and Russia cooperating on a positive basis. And this is showing the signs of potentially completely changing world history. And, you know, Glass-Steagall is obviously a part of that. So all these motions, and then you have this event happen right in the middle of that. That tells you what's going on. You got to understand where things are going in this positive direction. Understand what a real wrench this operation is, and what forces would be behind trying to completely upend this and reignite tensions with Russia. You know, do this right at the exact time Trump is meeting with Xi Jinping, blowing this thing up. So it's an ongoing fight, and people need to get active and vocal and express their support for this real policy shift underway. And in a sense, could be an opportunity to rat out who are the real forces that are running these kinds of operations? Who didn't tell the president the real intelligence? Who pushed the line that this was Assad running a chemical attack on his own people? I mean, just to say it, people know that's insane. Assad would have no motivation for launching a small chemical attack at this point in the situation in Syria. He's already winning the war. He knows that's going to be one of the the most decisive thing he could do. He knows that that's what's going to draw the most aggression against him, would be any kind of chemical attack. So to think that this would be something Assad would be motivated to do is just nuts. So it's just clear that this is intended to completely upend a process that could go in a very good direction. And whatever happened, we need to figure that out, and we need a mobilization to put the pressure on who was behind this, who was really pushing this crazy line that got the president to go with this thing. And that needs to be uprooted and taken out immediately and get back on track in the direction that we know we could be going in.
I mean, the way that you're going to establish a peace on this planet is through a new power relationship, which is completely diametrically opposite of what has dominated geopolitics for the last 40, 50 years. And that comes in the form of a relationship between China, Russia, and the United States. And any effort to drive a wedge between that should be seen as an effort to reignite the fires of World War III. We were right on the verge of that during the presidential campaigns, during the concluding years of Obama's administration. It was made very clear in the presidential debates that Hillary Clinton's policy of military intervention into Syria would bring us right up against the potential for a direct conflict between the United States and Russia. President Trump himself made that point, along with other candidates for president during the presidential debates. And as has been now repeated by various people, Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, for example, put out a statement this morning. Any military intervention into Syria, again, threatens to bring us into a direct conflict with Russia, which is a nuclear power and would threaten direct nuclear confrontation. So this is a very dangerous and very fast-moving situation, and we have to get to the truth of the matter here. And it's obviously a very complex picture and something that is not clear yet. But as Helga LaRouche was saying, what's clear is that confusion is reigning, and there is an effort by whatever element in the administration or elsewhere to interrupt the potential for new power relationships that could come out of a US-Russia-China alliance.
And I think Mr. LaRouche has continued to draw the line in the sand and identify time and time again the enemy of mankind as this British imperial faction, the British Empire. And this is, people have to make very clear, because there are a lot of people out there who would say, well, the British is not our enemy. You have to make compromises with the British. And we see where this has gotten us. And Mr. LaRouche, in his statements today, also emphatically made the point that we have to shut down Wall Street and all the bastards that do this kind of thing, referring to the Barack Obama, the apparatus that's made it its number one prerogative to stop the forward moving progress and potential that was set into motion by this president. Because when you're talking about what the president has made clear, his intention, as we saw with the discussion between Rex Tillerson just last week and China on non-confrontation, mutual respect. Also, the intention that was stated beforehand. This was a direct blow already to the control by the British Empire against the United States, and what they have continued to keep under their control to stop the alliance between the United States, Russia, and China. Because as Mr. LaRouche has made very clear on a number of occasions, once you have these powers come together and form the type of alliance toward the common aims of mankind toward economic development. This is the end of the British Empire. This is the end of the British system. So what's their only recourse? To create chaos, to create war. And we've seen this more than once. So as we've already expressed here. So I think the key right now is we go back to what we have emphasized over the recent period, that what we've put out as the immediate standard with Lyndon and LaRouche's 4 laws, bring down Wall Street once and for all, bring down this British apparatus that is completely infiltrating against this positive direction, and start to mobilize the population right now, as we've already put up the numbers on the board here. Again, this mobilization is absolutely critical, because we need to move absolutely at a rapid pace to get everybody to call into Congress, to go after those neocon warmongers who have been pushing people like Adam Schiff and John McCain and others who have been continuing to push toward this effort to get the United States into a nuclear confrontation with Russia. I mean, I think it's very important that, Tulsi Gabbard, Congresswoman Gabbard is coming out and saying these types of actions can lead to nuclear war. But we cannot sit back and wait for this to happen. We have to directly identify and define the enemy and define what they're absolutely opposed to. Again, the United States joining in the alliance of the New Silk Road, collaboration with Russia, China, India, creating the 4 powers of the world will eliminate the British Empire once and for all. And again, it is important at the moment that you have this escalation taking place, that you do have now, as Matt mentioned, a bill in the U.S. Senate for the restoring of Glass-Steagall. I think this comes at a very important time, but it really has to be escalated around that fight of the mobilization for Glass-Steagall, for LaRouche's 4 laws, and for our understanding of what the fight of the American system truly is. That is the fight to destroy and bring down this British Empire once and for all. And there's no other way around that.
I just want to underscore, one, the damage to the relationship with Russia, or potential. According to coverage, a Russian spokesperson said this step deals significant damage to U.S.-Russian ties, which are already in a deplorable state. And Putin has suspended the Memorandum of Understanding on Deconfliction, which greatly increases the danger in Syria of a military conflict between Russia and the United States. So people should be very clear the intent of the British. I also want to remind people what the London Spectator said the day that Trump was inaugurated, or the day after. They had a headline article that said, "Will President Trump be removed by assassination, in a coup, or by impeachment?" So we know the British Empire is determined to undermine and destroy the potential of this presidency. I also should say that you see the potential. There was an interview with President Xi Jinping during this summit, which has just ended, between him and Donald Trump. And obviously, China is very determined, in spite of all these difficulties, to hold a steady course and bring about the success of this. And what Xi Jinping said, according to Xinhua News, is that there are, quote, 1,000 reasons to make the China-US relationship work and no reason to break it, unquote. They say it takes political resolve and historical commitments from leaders of both countries to enhance the bilateral relations in the 45 years to come. And it should be noted that Xi Jinping invited President Trump to come to China, and President Trump accepted the invitation sometime this year. The time is not clear. So the situation couldn't be more clear if you think about the tweet from British Broadcasting that this is a great way to undermine a strategic summit between the US and China, is to have this sort of thing happen. And we have to be on a total mobilization to smoke out and destroy the British Empire faction that misinformed the president of the actual situation and would argue for such an ill-conceived action against the sovereign nation.
Let me go back and refer again to the blog that I raised in the beginning from the website of Mr. Pat Lang. And what he continued to say was this attack was a violation of international law. Donald Trump authorized an unjustified attack on a sovereign country. But what is even more disturbing is that people like Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis, CIA Director Pompeo, and NSA Director General McMaster went along with the charade. Frontline troops know the truth. These facts will eventually come out. And you can't help but be reminded of what happened when John F. Kennedy was double-crossed by his own intelligence advisors in the attack on the Bay of Pigs, a very ill-advised attack which he launched. And it was when he realized that he had been double-crossed by the intelligence community that he decided that drastic action must be taken, and he cleaned out that entire apparatus, firing the Dulles brothers, and proceeded from there. One can't help but be reminded of that historical precedent. But the question here is to get the facts, to penetrate through what in fact did happen, to find out who it was who propagated these lies or withheld the truth from the president, how this decision was made, and what the intention of those actions were. So I'm going to put on the screen one more time the contact information, and Helga Zepp-LaRouche and Mr. LaRouche both personally called for a direct mobilization of the American people to raise this very question. And you can contact the White House, 202-465-1111, or just go ahead and tweet directly at Real Donald Trump. And also, the same thing should be done with all of the members of Congress, both sides of this issue. A total mobilization should take place from the American people. And this does not detract, but this feeds directly in to the mobilization that we already have underway to restore the Glass-Steagall Act, to put this corrupt Wall Street element away for good, to protect the American economy, and to bring the United States decisively into this new power relationship. And I think what this situation makes more clear than anything is that the responsibility is ours. The responsibility is yours. It's not going to come through sitting back, cheerleading any political faction, any political leader. It's only by keeping a clear-eyed focus on what the realities of the present situation are and what the principles are. What do you stand for? What do you know must be done? And what is the leadership that the LaRouche PAC has provided and continues to provide? And to set the course, a straight and narrow course along exactly those principles, and to mobilize accordingly. So I would like to invite Ben, Diane, Keisha, if you have anything to add, we can do so briefly and then bring this broadcast to a conclusion.
I think this mobilization is very important in the context that just next week it has been confirmed that the U.S. Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, is scheduled to go to Russia. And we have to make clear that we cannot allow for anything to get in the way with the forward-moving progress of the potential for the U.S. to actually collaborate, as they've said, and this is with Russia, to defeat ISIS, to stop this terrorist network, to actually collaborate on economic development and cooperation, as we're seeing with the potential with China and Russia, China and the United States. But it also has to be made clear that these types of actions cannot be tolerated, and we have to again make the point that this is an operation that has been run against the presidency of the United States. The intention has been made clear from the very beginning that it was the intention of the British Empire to stop this president from moving in a positive direction. And we have to not sit back, as you said, and continue to escalate. So everybody should be calling their Congress members, calling the White House, and doing everything that you can. And those who are leading in this fight, in terms of some of the statements that have come out, really have to continue to make the point that there has been an operation that has been run against the presidency with the intent to create total chaos.
Okay, keep your eyes on the LaRouche PAC website. We will have more printed material and video material as the situation develops, and report back to us on the results of your phone calls, your tweets, your mobilization. We need tight coordination on this and a very clear focus. So thank you very much, all of you, for tuning in. Thank you to Ben, Keisha, and Diane for joining me here today. And please stay tuned to LaRouchePAC.com. Good night.